Manhattan after midnight pressed against the glass walls of Castellano Ventures, rain streaking down like the city was warning her. Inside, Diana Castellano stood alone in her corner office, the final contract of a $12 billion deal glowing on her screen. She had spent 20 years climbing to this moment. Then every monitor in the tower went dark. A heartbeat later, a single sentence appeared, white against the void. Your empire was always temporary. Diana stepped back, her pulse spiking. Who did this? Her voice cracked the silence. From the doorway, a low voice answered. Someone who knows your system better than your own team. She turned to see Jamie Sullivan, the night janitor, rein still on his shoulders. His eyes fixed on the corrupted screens with a precision she didn't expect. You shouldn't be alone right now, he said quietly. You understand this? Diana demanded. Jamie nodded once. Enough to know this wasn't an attack from the outside. A chill cut through her. If not outside, then someone inside had just declared war. And Jamie was the only person left standing between her and ruin. For the full story, like and subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales. You won't want to miss what happens next. The storm outside thickened as Jamie stepped deeper into the ruined office, the glow from the corrupted monitors flickering like distressed heartbeats. He closed the door behind him, locking out the noise of a city that had no idea an empire was collapsing 42 floors above the street. Diana stayed beside the desk, arms tense, breathing shallow as she watched a man who was supposed to be sweeping floors navigate her entire digital universe with the ease of someone who once commanded rooms she'd never stepped into. He moved quickly, tracing pathways through the wreckage, whispering to himself in a rhythm that felt like code had never left his veins. Diana followed his hands, unable to keep the frustration from slipping out. How is any of this possible? We pay millions for security. You paid for walls, Jamie said, not looking up. Someone on the inside opened a door. The words struck harder than she expected. Inside meant betrayal. Inside meant rot beneath the marble floors and glass walls. Inside meant someone who ate at her table had played a role in her destruction. When the first backup file resurfaced like a pulse returning to a dying patient, Diana felt her lungs expand for the first time in an hour. But hope came tangled with fear, because if Jamie could resurrect her systems, he could expose whoever had killed them. Hours passed. The storm outside calmed, but inside the office the tension only grew. At 3 a.m., Jamie found the breach, a coded shadow buried deep, designed to erase every trace of itself. But it had a signature. Small, almost imperceptible, but human. Whoever did this wasn't just skilled, Jamie said quietly. They were familiar. Very familiar. Say the name, Diana demanded. Jamie hesitated. Stephanie Crawford. Silence rippled across the room. Stephanie, her prodigy, the woman she had trusted with every digital muscle of the company, the one she had raised through the ranks because she reminded Diana of herself 20 years earlier. To learn that her brightest star had carved the company open felt like a blade placed inside her ribs. But Jamie kept digging, and the truth only sharpened. Messages, transfers, backdoor entries, all pointing to a conspiracy wrapped in ambition and bitterness. And by the time dawn crept through the glass skyline, Diana knew confrontation was inevitable. When Stephanie entered her office later that morning, she walked with the confidence of someone who believed she was untouchable. But the moment she saw the printed logs on Diana's desk, her expression flickered. Not guilt, fear of being exposed. You should have trusted me, Stephanie said, voice trembling with a bitterness she had tried to bury. I built everything you bragged about. I held this place together while you chased power. And you never once, looked back to see who was holding your weight. Diana absorbed the words, but she didn't flinch. You had brilliance. You had opportunity. And you chose betrayal. That's not my failure. That's yours. When security escorted Stephanie out, the entire floor watched. Executives whispered. Assistants stared. But no one defended her. She had dug her grave, and now she was falling into it. Yet the worst betrayal was still waiting. Days later, when Jamie uncovered evidence that linked everything back to Valerie Stone, the CFO and Diana's closest friend, the room seemed to tilt. Diana felt the weight of 15 years collapse. Boardrooms, late-night strategy sessions, shared victories, all rotting beneath a truth that had been hiding in plain sight. Valerie had smiled beside her while poisoning her foundation. Jamie showed her the final proof. Wire transfers, encrypted communication, acquisition plans. Valerie had been feeding Neuraline Industries every weakness, every vulnerability, setting the stage for a takeover once Castellano Ventures collapsed under the cyber attack. Why her? Diana whispered, more to herself than to Jamie. Why would she do this? Jamie didn't answer. Some wounds in the world had no logic, only pain. But the betrayal did not end quietly. Valerie, cornered by evidence she could no longer outrun, didn't break into tears or apologies. She broke into rage. "You think you built this alone?" she shouted as detectives placed cuffs on her wrists. "I carried you for years. And you treated me like a shadow." Diana met her gaze, steady, exhausted. "You were never a shadow. You became one." The elevator closed, sealing Valerie's fate. Justice, at least the beginning of it, had arrived. For weeks, the company buzzed with the fallout. Reporters camped outside. Investors demanded explanations. The board questioned Diana's future. What should have been her greatest triumph had become a public autopsy. But Jamie remained steady beside her, not for power or praise, but because someone had to hold the line until the storm passed. One night, while reviewing system repair logs, Jamie paused. "People like Stephanie and Valerie didn't break you," he said. "They just showed you where the cracks were." Diana looked at him with something close to gratitude. "And you showed me what strength looks like." But Jamie's battles weren't over. Anonymous threats began appearing, messages warning him to stop digging or face consequences. One night he found a tracking device under his car. Fear for his daughter, Ruby, rose like fire in his chest. He protected her the only way he knew. Distance. But distance carried its own heartbreak. Ruby asked him why he looked sad, whether he was proud of her, whether he would be home for dinner like other dads. Her innocence sliced deeper than any threat ever could. When Jamie and Diana finally set the trap, they did it with quiet determination. They planted false data, created a perfect bait for the final conspirator, and waited. And when Valerie, believing herself unseen, logged in to freeze accounts and finish the company's collapse, every camera caught her. Every word, every keystroke, every confession. And now there was no escape. The morning of Valerie's arraignment, the courtroom brimmed with tension. Cameras flashed. Reporters whispered. Diana sat quietly behind the prosecution. Her expression composed but her eyes carrying years of exhaustion. Jamie sat beside her. No longer the janitor, but the man who had saved the company she had almost lost. Valerie entered in chains, defiance gone, her expression hollow. She scanned the room, searching for sympathy, but found none. When the judge listed her charges, corporate fraud, insider trading, conspiracy to commit financial sabotage, her hands trembled. Then Jamie stepped forward as a witness. He spoke clearly, not with vengeance but with the weight of truth. He described the attack, the backdoor code, the offshore transactions. He narrated the night she stood in Diana's office plotting the final blow. Every word sealed her fate. When the judge finally delivered the sentence, 12 years in federal prison without parole, a quiet hush spread across the courtroom. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't cruelty. It was justice landing exactly where it belonged. Valerie looked at Diana one last time, her voice cracking. "Everything I did was for respect. For the recognition you never gave me." Diana shook her head. "Respect isn't stolen. It's earned." They took Valerie away, her footsteps echoing like the final chapter of a story that had consumed too many years. And when Diana turned to Jamie, she saw something unexpected. Calm. Purpose. A man who had faced darkness and still chosen to build rather than destroy. In the months that followed, as Castellano Ventures rebuilt itself and the press shifted to newer scandals, Diana approached Jamie with an offer. Not a promotion but a partnership. A center that would give unseen people a chance to be seen. A place where brilliance buried under hardship could rise again. The Sullivan Innovation Center became exactly that. Sanctuary. Fresh start. A victory born from ashes. Inside those walls, people who had once been dismissed found belonging. Jamie discovered balance with Ruby, who now ran through the hallways laughing as if the world never frightened her. Diana found something she had never known she needed. Connection. And the story of the empire that almost fell turned into something far more powerful. A story of rebuilding what mattered and letting go of what didn't. Yet even with peace returning, one truth remained clear. Some betrayals destroy, but others reveal exactly who deserves to rise. And as for the villain who tried to tear everything apart, her consequences had only just begun. For in prison, Valerie would face the very isolation she once imposed on others. She lost her freedom, her power, her reputation, while Jamie and Diana built something stronger than she could ever destroy. And that is the price of betrayal. In the months that followed, the noise around the scandal faded, but the shift inside Diana and Jamie remained. She no longer measured success by the height of her tower, and he no longer saw himself as someone the world overlooked. Their choices had pulled truth out of shadows, painful, costly, but freeing in a way neither expected. The center they built grew slowly, quietly, becoming a place where people walked in carrying old wounds and walked out carrying possibility. And some afternoons, when sunlight spilled across the floor, Diana would pause and watch Jamie explain a concept to a newcomer with the same patience he once used to rebuild a broken system in the middle of the night. She understood then that resilience wasn't loud. It was steady. It was choosing to rise even after everything had been taken apart. And the past, with all its fractures, no longer held her captive. She had traded an empire of glass for something lasting, something real. One evening, as Ruby's laughter echoed through the hall, Jamie looked at the room they'd created and said softly, "This feels like a beginning." Diana nodded, knowing he was right. If this story moved you, help it reach more hearts. Like, share, and subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales to support the next chapter.